So today's podcast is extremely relevant, special, and also something that is mostly not spoken about. This is the brave girl Aparna Piramal Raje, who's a writer, columnist, public speaker, and an educator, and the author of the recently released Chemical Khichdi. This name was very intriguing, Aparna. So I'm going to ask you more about from where you did even thought of naming the book Chemical Khichdi and why. It's all about hacking your mental health, a book on your experiences of living a serious mental health condition that you went through for almost 2 decades. You have been writing for Mint. You write a lot about leadership and management work styles. There is a lot that you cover in your space when you also talk about how do we handle emotions and how can we also know some hacks. So welcome to SecondAct podcast, my dear. And today is going to be extremely beneficial. And I want everyone to hear this because so much that you have shared around this journey. Let me start by asking you, discovery of writing about this book and the name itself. Why don't you tell us more about it?
Well, I wanted to write this book for a long time, actually. So I've been living with bipolarity or bipolar disorder, as it's known, for about 2 decades. The official diagnosis actually happened much later than the first incidents. So, to cut a long story short, I actually wanted to write this book as early as 2015. But I kept having these mood swings, which is a big feature of bipolar disorder. And I wasn't, sufficiently detached from the material to be able to finish more than a chapter at a time. But over the last 4 years, I've stabilized and I think I've made some of a recovery. And during the lockdown, I just found the time, space, and distance that I needed to actually focus and write this. So that's what the experience of writing it has been all about. The title actually refers to, there's a poem in the book, there are some poems in the book also, and there's one called Chemical Khichdi, which is about my acceptance of this condition as one that had chemical imbalances to it. So it's not just something that could have been solved through talk therapy, which is what we were doing at the time. Before I started medication, we were relying exclusively on talk therapy. So it was really an acceptance of the fact that there were chemical imbalances that needed treatment. And I just thought it's like a fun way of getting everyone, interested in this subject, which can be quite heavy.
Which is true. But you have spoken about that how privilege plays an important role, and also, firstly, I would say removing the stigma or adjusting to the stigma, and also reaching out. You also took a long time to actually speak about it in open, I guess, through this book or otherwise. So where does one realize that is going through something like this and one needs to talk about it? Because I think all of us are going through emotional turmoils at one point or the other in life. We don't know, is it the regular stuff of up and down, or do we need more attention than that? How do we discover that?
Yeah, I mean, what I would really say is that I think it all depends on what case to case. It's difficult to make generalizations, but in something like bipolar, the symptoms can be quite extreme from the normal behavior. They're sort of, people have racing thoughts. I mean, in my case, at least, I can't sleep. I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of ideas. My facial expressions change. It's quite clear to anybody else that I'm not my usual self, and so then it makes sense to go and visit a doctor at that time, visit a psychiatrist or visit a therapist. Now, for people who are maybe not experiencing such extreme or severe mood swings, they may want to just talk to a counselor or a therapist to understand what's going on with them. And I think that's a good starting point, just to see, because there could be a different set of symptoms entirely that need to be addressed. And I don't think there's any harm with having that conversation. And in fact, I think it can be helpful. So I would strongly advise that.
So there is also a very important part of how people are handling us. And I think that is very relevant to our family, the place that we work. So I'm sure that you went through your own set of, challenges with that, and maybe sometimes we don't even understand. To be honest, I think sometimes I have a chat with my kids, and when my daughter sometimes tells me that she needs therapy, I say, "Well, what's wrong with you? Everything is there, which is right for you. So why would you even say that?" How do people like us, probably who don't even understand this world, or become a little insensitive, or maybe don't even have that thing of feeling that it's not normal? What should everybody do? Actually, everybody needs to be sensitive about it. What did you experience?
Well, I think, the book is really about not just for people who are experiencing a mental health condition themselves, it's for the people in their ecosystem, right? So that could be the caregivers, the family members, loved ones, friends, mentors, colleagues, people in the workplace. So anybody who I would put in that category of being a caregiver or being an ally. And I think, frankly, all of us are allies to somebody or the other with a mental health condition. So, and we all know, even me, like I've been a, recipient of so much care and love, but I'm also a giver of people today, friends of mine who might be suffering from depression. So, I'm conscious of that. So I think what we need is really sensitivity, and just to sort of understand, if somebody comes to you and says, I think I need therapy, then to really understand, why and what they're really looking for, and to see how they can help. Because therapy doesn't mean that there's something necessarily wrong with you, or you don't have to have something, so-called wrong with you to go and see a therapist. It just means that you want to have a conversation with somebody who's a professional, who's not judgmental, who's giving you a safe space to talk about what's going on inside your mind. And I think that no matter how privileged you are, you go through, there are a lot of stresses and strains that might make it difficult for people, in today's existence, to find happiness and fulfillment. So if that's, therapy is just a one way to achieve that.
Uh, Normally a challenge also comes that how do you find the right therapist, in the sense that because of the last 2.5 years, because of pandemic, I think everyone is going through some kind of a turmoil. Not to identify, like, what kind of anxieties have come, but there are lots of, different emotions that we're feeling at different times. So to look for the person who would be able to put you back on track, or to, have this very deep conversation with you, how do we make sure that we go to the right person? Of course, I don't know if you will be able to answer it and, like that, but that's a confusion in my mind as well. And I'm sure the people who are listening to us also have this. How do I reach the right person who gives me the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question, because I don't think it's always easy to find the kind of care that one is looking for. The good part is that since the pandemic, there are more people doing online therapy. And so you can access people from different parts of the country, especially if you live in a place where you don't have access to therapy. I think there are more startup models that are offering therapy to, let's say, first-time therapy seekers or younger people. So I mentioned a company called Therapize, which has been quite successful in the last couple of years on this front. I think what you're looking for is somebody who really understands you, who you think you can form a connection with, who's not going to be judgmental, as I said earlier, who can ask the right questions, who can, get you to think about things, and somebody who is, coming from a cultural background that would be similar to the context in which you're operating. Because sometimes, everybody comes from their own narrative and their own story. So there should be similarities, or at least they should be able to understand where you're coming from and not be critical of it. So I think somebody who's going to put your needs at the center of the conversation, that's really important, and not always think about everybody else around you. So I think that's really important in a place like India also, especially if you're married. I think they tend to think of, putting the marriage as the center of the conversation rather than the individual.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right about that. But, is there, like, for any kind of mental turmoil, emotions, anxiety, or whatever, is it different than experiencing bipolarity? What is the difference between being, feeling yourself stressed out and being anxious and just, talking about being bipolar?
Yeah, I think we all have mood swings, and I think that's really normal. It's part of life. But I think the difference between being bipolar and just having normal mood swings or the regular ups and downs that we all go through is that they're just more extremes, and they go on for the if you think of it as a kind of a curve, that goes up and down. Like the extremes of the curve are much more. So in bipolar, you could be, you could go to the extreme of what I do, which is I do a lot of writing, but you could be like trashing a restaurant or doing substance abuse or really getting onto social media and being uncontrollable on social media. You could go to these extremes. Your behavior is really very, very different. And it goes on for a few days, a few weeks perhaps. So you have that energy that keeps you going for a long period of time, and then eventually you crash, and then you get into these really low phases of depression, which also go on for a length of time. And I talk about these symptoms in more detail in the book. It's best to get a clinical diagnosis from a mental health professional, obviously. But if you are thinking that, does this sound like something that's familiar? But I think it's just more a question of it's really where you are on the spectrum in terms of having a fairly kind of ups and downs that we all go through versus a much more extreme set of behaviors.
Yeah, so you also talk about that, even being bipolar is 0.6% of India's population is already bipolar. Just that I don't know how many of us are really paying attention to that or even seeking out for help. And I'm sure that even this is a number which is there, it's penned down, but I'm sure that the numbers are much more than what it is here. So why do you think people stop themselves or do not even get there to identify that there is a need for help, or what is going on within me? What is social conditioning? Do you think that
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, whether it's bipolar or whether it's any other condition, with such as depression or anxiety or anything else that is more common,
Right.
I think the fact is that we associate any mental health condition with personality. Like we think that that is that person's personality. Oh, that person is really, has negative thoughts, or that person is not approachable, or that person is not accessible, or that person is not a friendly person. We associate whatever mental health condition they're going through to be their personality. And it was like quite a breakthrough for me when I got a letter from one of my doctors saying she has a normal personality. I mean, she is diagnosed as bipolar, but she has a normal personality. So it was then that I came to understand that there's a difference between between your personality and your condition. So you can have be a normal vibrant person, and yet you can have this condition which takes you into a different area every now and then. But luckily in my case, I can come back to what I am normally, and through all the therapies that I've described in my book. So I think that this confusion between personality and illness is one of the reasons why we just think that this is the way people are. And then I think there's a huge stigma about seeking professional help, like going to a psychiatrist, going to a therapist, taking medication. These are all big problem areas for us. And I don't think, like it took me a while to sort of say, yeah, I'm on this medication, but now it's so normalized in my head, right, to say I go to a therapist, I go to a psychiatrist. It's as normal as going to a regular doctor for me to see these people. And I take the antipsychotics and the other medication that I need to take on a daily basis to keep me stable. So that's just completely normalized inside my head and in our family. But I think as I keep saying, courage is a marathon, and it takes a while to kind of get to that stage where you can talk about it openly and normalize it in your head.
But do you think that there is a difference between what was happening a few years ago to what's happening, especially in the last 2-3 years, when people have actually opened up and started to speak about it, started to identify emotions? Till now, the only emotions we knew were sad, happy, angry, or something like that. Now people actually go deeper into say, no, actually, how do I actually feel? Let me identify. Do you think there is
Yeah. Well, I think definitely the younger generation is much more open to the idea of, to be more mindful and to be more aware. And to some extent, it goes to the other extreme also, where they use these words very casually, like I'm ADHD or I'm bipolar or I'm depressed, or they just kind of say it like that. But and that's not particularly helpful necessarily either. But I think that for in general, I would say more awareness is a good thing.
That's true. So you spoke about a lot of therapies that have helped you, but at the same time, what is the best that you go back to in case you've now that you exactly know what you are going through, you went through a lot of medical help as well. What are the tips for people who are, wanting to do some quick fix of like taking stability inside them? What should they do to just come back to balance?
So the way I look at it now, actually, and having interacted with people over the last few weeks who've read the book and responded, is I think that there's a set of three therapies which one needs to, pursue to survive. According to me, at least, that's been my experience. So the first is medical therapies, which is the drug therapy and the talk therapy that we've spoken about. Then there is the love therapy, which is the role of the family and the caregivers, whoever the caregivers, they don't have to be family, but whoever the caregivers are there in your life. And then there is the lifestyle therapy, which is really the sleep, the exercise, the nutrition. So these are the kind of minimum therapies that you need to, that I felt will help you, will help anyone, or help me certainly get a handle on the condition. But this is actually what most people struggle with, Archana, that they just getting the acceptance from the family, going to a doctor and putting their lifestyle back on track. Even these three simple hacks, people struggle with so much, and they don't get the treatment that they need and they would really benefit from. So that's the stuff that you need to do to survive. And then to really thrive, I feel the four that have really helped me is one is the role of the allies in your life, as I talked about it, your friends and your networks and, the mentors, the people who are a little bit of a distance, but who can really give the empathy that is needed. Then the role of the workplace is really important, because we all go to work, and work is such a, important part of our lives. And if you can talk to your colleagues about your condition, then that's a game changer. It was really a game changer for me. So that's the workplace. Then I feel a very important aspect is the conversations that one is having with oneself. And I don't think you need to have a mental health condition to do this, certainly. Like I maintain a journal. I've been doing that for the last 10 years. So this has really helped me, in terms of being really just understanding myself and understanding what I'm going through. And I can look back and reflect on it and see what I need to really thrive. So the conversation with the self is really important. And spiritual therapy, whether or not you're a believer, you're not a believer, I think there's certain aspects of spirituality which are sort of independent of that, which is whether it's mindfulness or gratitude, looking at understanding the role of the mind and the body, and understanding the role of the intellect. Like some of these things I've talked about, they are really other ways to have conversations with yourself, and to understand bigger questions like what is happiness, success, fulfillment. And these are all things that ultimately help to get us to thrive. So as I said, three therapies that help one survive, and four therapies that help one thrive. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that you've put it very beautifully. And I think you have also mentioned that I'm happy, successful, and bipolar. And that's what I think most people will think, that people with bipolar, what do you call, is it a disorder, is it a wrong word? I'm not even sure, because how do you say, please clarify so that we all know what to call it the right way.
Well, I just call it bipolarity. Like I live with bipolarity. That's what I say. Or I say I am bipolar, or I live with bipolarity. I prefer to avoid the word disorder, because it suggests some kind. So I don't really like that too much.
Yeah, I think we went off. Your internet connection went off for a second, so we missed that sentence. Yes.
Oh, so I was saying, yeah, I was just saying that I prefer the word um, bipolarity to say I live with bipolarity or I am bipolar rather than using the word disorder. Word disorder suggests some kind of malfunction of some sort, you know. So I prefer, but this is just my grammatical preference, and people can have a different preference. So.
But I think it must be also now that more and more people are able to come up to you and interact, because you must have seen that the world has opened up and everybody is talking about how they are feeling. Suddenly, do you feel that rush?
Yeah, so a lot of people are messaging me, and you know, it's very interesting that um, like when I put up a post, then you know, in public, people will say, you know, whatever, congratulations or whatever, this is really good. People will benefit from this. But then in private, people will share their private conversations with me. You know, they'll share about how they are caregivers to someone with a mental health condition, or they themselves have a mental health condition, and maybe they're reading my book or how it is meaning. So that's a very private conversation that's happening. That's not happening in public yet. So
Yeah. So, what do you think as people, all of us, what should we do to make it as a normal conversation?
well, I like I said, I think, you know, to normalize it, you have to not think of it as something that requires courage. I mean, the very fact that people keep saying it's so courageous of you shows how much stigma there is.
Yeah.
Because if there was no stigma, then it wouldn't be a courageous thing. So I think to normalize it, I think you just have to start small, and you have to, you know, start talking about it slowly with the individuals in your life, whether that's people in your workplace, whether that's friends outside your immediate circle, whether it's some of your members of your extended family. There are at least 60 people that I've interviewed in the book, and these are all 60 people who I have shared my vulnerability with, you know. And if there's a message in the book, it's that to share your vulnerability, whatever that vulnerability is. It need not also be a mental health condition. It could be a physical health condition. It could be, you know, some other emotional issue that you're dealing with. It could be a relationship in your life that you're struggling with. Like it could be many different vulnerabilities. But if you share that with people and you trust in them, they're able to help you. If you don't do that, then it's difficult for somebody to be able to help you.
So you did mention that, you know, this book is not about only people who are going through a certain kind of like an emotional upheaval. It is for everybody. So when we read a book, especially this one, what as a reader should be my biggest takeaways? Of course, you spell some of it here, that how to normalize things and, you know, make it like a very comfortable and safe space to talk about it. What else can a regular reader take away from the book?
Well, I think there are some takeaways on mental health, which is, first of all, that there's one which says that mental health is a team sport. And why I say a regular reader will benefit from that is because we are all on someone's team. Whether or not we realize it, you know, 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 people are likely to develop some mental health condition. So you will know 5 people. Out of those 5 people, one of those people has something. So you are on that person's team. And are you being a good ally? Do you know how to speak to that person? Do you know how to have that conversation? So I think that is an important aspect that a regular reader would get out of it, whether that person is in the workplace, in the family, or a friend, or in any other sphere of life. So I think that's an important aspect. Then I think I would want anyone to understand that, you know, we need to be kinder to ourselves and to the people around us when we have vulnerabilities that they have shared. You know, I think that we are all pretty tough on ourselves. I think that we live in a society, particularly with social media, and I think particularly with younger people who are really exposed to social media a lot. We're constantly judging ourselves, and we are being judged by the external world, and I think that's pretty tough. So I just think that we need to be, you know, kinder to ourselves. That's another really important takeaway. And I think that, just coming back again to the whole space of mental health, I just think that the book is trying to say that you can have a mental health condition and live the life that you want to live.
Mhm.
That's really important. You know, I mean, bipolar, like I said, is pretty serious. So even if you don't have something as so-called serious as that, but Even if you are, I mean, if you have something that may be considered more common, but to you it's serious, whether it's depression or anxiety, for example, then, you can still live the life you want to live if you try some of these tools and techniques. And these are not just the only tools and techniques. The book is really an invitation for you to think about what could work for you. That is also, it's not just a template that you can implement like a cookbook. It's more really an invitation to have a conversation with yourself.
That's very beautifully put down. Do you also feel that, men are not able to also bring out their emotions because of the stereotype that we all live in, that the man is not supposed to do this and he's supposed to be the stronger and the responsibility? But when we look at the results that, the surveys results which say that most men try to commit suicide more than women do, and, their cases are higher because somewhere they're just not able to emote. What is your understanding with, now talking to a lot of people, and I'm sure that a lot of men are reaching out to?
Yeah, I mean, I've really been pleasantly surprised at the response I've got from men of all ages. I think that they are opening up and they're sharing, and that's been really nice. I always expected women to relate to it because obviously it's, a woman at the center of the story, and it's a story about emotions. So, just to be stereotypical, maybe I thought women would always relate to it. But yes, it's so nice that men have been responding.
That's very, very nice. So this podcast is on SecondAct, and SecondAct, of course, when there are different meanings to it, but the main meaning is that what is the higher purpose? And I think you've spoken about purpose as well. So how does one discover the purpose first? And do you have a second act?
Yeah, I think, I think a big part of my whole bipolarity was all about my second act, I guess. So I very much believe in purpose. The purpose of life is a life of purpose is a favorite quote of mine.
Yes.
So is there in the book also. I had reached a stage, when my first act was all about family business and working there and trying to be CEO of one of my family businesses. And essentially, partly because I think I couldn't enjoy, I mean, there were times when I did well at it, but in general, there were times when I got pretty stressed out and my family didn't feel that I was cut out to do that. And I was pretty devastated because I had grown up my entire life and my education was all sort of centered around taking on this kind of role. And my image of myself was very much about being in the family business. And I had to really look at who I was and what my identity was. And my entire identity was wrapped up in my professional identity. It was really important for me at that time. And so I had to begin this whole process of unlearning and finding a different purpose. And now today I think through writing, speaking, and teaching, I have a whole new identity, which I find very fulfilling. And I think that being able to kind of contribute to society in different ways is a big part of that purpose. Being able to create something that people find useful or that I just enjoy creating also is part of that purpose. So I think I'm in a lot happier position than had I not, gone through this whole churning, which I did for many years.
Yeah, and in the book, you also have mentioned that how organizations need to support this. And you were citing your own example that when you went out to your own boss, how did she really, kind of gave you that comfort and understood what you were going through? So what is that one thing that you want to tell the organizations when, people actually have the courage to reach out because not many speak about it?
Yeah, I think it's really important for the conversation between the employee and the manager is a very, very important conversation. I think the way that a manager could respond is by saying, thank you for trusting me with this information, by not being judgmental, by understanding the implications of it. So, for example, asking what is the kind of support you would need. So in my case, what I needed was extra time to finish my stories, not to have consecutive deadlines. So to be able to accommodate that, to find the right fit. So for example, it wouldn't make sense to have someone like me on the news pages of a newspaper, but to have them more on the features pages where the deadlines were a little bit more negotiable and flexible. So to make sure that I wasn't, I've been often urged to take on roles which would have a weekly reporting, but that would be just too much for me at this point, given everything else I'm doing. So not to take on those kind of projects, but to take on projects which are more manageable. So it's really a conversation about how this can work for both the employee and for the manager. And frankly, it can lead to really good results because, I've been at the same newspaper for nearly 14 years. I have written for pretty much every editor over there, senior editor over there. I've written on a variety of subjects. I have specialized in certain areas and created a brand for the newspaper. That brand has become a book. That book has turned into a lot of speaking engagements. So a lot of different things have happened, and I think that if the organization is willing to accommodate and willing to take all of these considerations into account, then they can actually lead to a really good outcome. The thing is, it was interesting that it wasn't just one person at the Mint. It was my immediate editor, but also the editor-in-chief of the newspaper, who Sukumar, who also was willing to give me those second chances.
Wow. So tell me about a few people who have impacted you. You have mentioned them in the book, but just people who have not read it so far, who have impacted you in what area, so that you were able to do what you're doing right now?
I would say that a lot of people have impacted me, including the family, and they are mentioned in the book. My husband, my mother, my sister, my children, my dad, my uncle. Like, there are many people in the family, of course, they're friends. But I would say it's one individual that I count myself very fortunate to have, and I would advise everybody to seek out such an individual, is one of my earlier mentors. His name is Kozum Merchant, and he is in the book also. So when I was making this transition from business to journalism, he really became a big source of guidance for me, because he was able to really steer me in the right direction, having been a journalist himself and also having been in business himself. So he knew both of these sectors really well, and we used to meet very often. He was also one of these people who was willing to receive a lot of the writing I did when I was manic, which was really nice of him, because it used to happen at odd hours of the night, and there'd be like flurries of emails over a short burst of time, and very often he would read a lot of it or listen to it or whatever it was, and just having that ability to receive that is, I think, a big really finely developed character trait. So I think that so to have somebody like that in your life, who can kind of be a mentor, who can be a coach, who can help you personally and professionally, I really don't think I would be where I am today without someone like him in my life, for sure.
So nice, and thank you for mentioning that. And also, for people who are hearing us, it is very important to have that one person in your life who is really, without judgments, creating that safe space for you, where you can lean on and be your best version. And I'm hoping that everybody gets one. It's not easy, to be honest. It's a lot of work to find that person, but maybe we become that person for somebody. And I think that should be the aim, actually. May I really open my boundaries to get people and invite them and accept them as they are. So there's so much to, of course, learn from the book. But of course, life has taught you some lessons as well. So if I ask you, looking back to your life, what are the life lessons that you would want to talk about today, so that, whatever you are bringing out, we learn from that?
Well, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is about being resilient. I think that if anything, the pandemic has taught us, it's about how to be resilient. So I think that's really important, and just to keep at it, and to more than even courage, I would say it's just important to be conscious of the vulnerabilities, and to develop resilience. That's one thing. um, I would also say that um, I think it's really important, as I said, kindness to each other and to yourself. That is really important, having that. The other thing I would say is, if I had to go back and look into time, is that develop an inner scorecard rather than an outer scorecard. So I think that, one of the pitfalls of, I guess, being academically, quite successful and going to a place like Oxford or Harvard, or doing well at my school, is that you tend to think that these are all part of your identity, and you need that. Then I started needing that external validation all the time to kind of feel good about myself, and rather than really working on my inner scorecard. So I think that's one thing that over time, if there's a shortcut to that process, then that's what I would have told my younger self.
Beautiful. So I have some rapid fire questions for you before we wrap up. I want to ask you one person who motivates you always.
Sorry?
One person who motivates you.
One person who motivates me, I would have to still say my mother. She's just incredible.
Wow.
She's also a writer, and she's done really well, but I think she is just an incredible person. Yeah.
Okay. And what books do you lean on to when you need some help, advice, or to just lift yourself up?
What books? I have to go back to look at my bookshelf. But recently I read Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And I think every woman should probably read that book. I really liked it.
Wow. Okay. One piece of advice for a woman you want to give?
Fuck the patriarch.
Oh, that's great. The fun side of you is?
The fun side of me is everything from laughing at myself to playing table tennis with my son.
Wow, great. The highest point of your life, if you remember, was?
Well, I think I'll just have to say, recently we had this book launch, and I thought so much about the book. I thought so much about the book launch, but I actually loved the songs that were played at the book launch. So far, that's one of the highest points of my life. We had an amazing singer, and she sang Amazing Grace, Hero by Mariah Carey, and the fight song. So it was amazing.
Lovely. Before you go, I want to just ask you one thing, that how do you want to take this to the world? You've written about it, but what are the next steps?
Well, it's still a work in progress. It's just started. And I think it's a platform for other conversations, definitely. One of the main areas that I want to engage with is I want to engage with companies to do sessions with them for their employees, to make it, because I really think that the workplace is a game changer. So if we can have conversations, I will in any case go to places like colleges and other institutes, but if we can start doing that with companies and they can see it as an investment into their people, then that would be a great thing. Yeah.
And I'm going to support you 100% in that, and I will make sure that I spread the word as well, and we take it forward from there. And we do need people like you, my dear friend. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for just writing your entire life story. It takes courage. It does. And I'm so glad that you could do, and there's so much to learn from the book. It's very interesting. I'm halfway through, and I really want to also bring in a lot of learning from the book into my life. So kudos to you, congratulations, and may this work goes to the world. Thanks for being on the
Thank
podcast.
you so much for having me on the show, and for your interest and for supporting Chemical Khichdi.
Thanks, Aparna.